This is our first live stream direct to the promenade. And I'm delighted to be here with Brian Behlendorf. Thank you very much for coming through, for putting up with the last half an hour of us getting ready for this, first of all.
Thank you, Edie.
Executive Director of Hyperledger at the Linux Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 2 years ago, I think it was, we were up in the Ice House and you were telling me about blockchain, distributed ledger technology, and how you thought it was the most exciting thing that you'd seen since the invention of the World Wide Web.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me where you think the most exciting real deployments are for this technology today.
Yeah, well, in the 2 years since we talked and in the 3 years since the project started, we've moved from working on software that hopefully might one day do something interesting to having over 100 different production blockchain networks out there using Hyperledger Fabric, using Hyperledger Sawtooth, and other technologies coming from the project. And those span a number of different sectors. Some of the more predominant use cases we see are in trade finance, in supply chain, traceability, in healthcare, but also a very long tail applied to education, applied to government use cases, all sorts of sectors where there's a need for a common system of record and a way to coordinate business activities in a decentralized way.
Okay, so if I'm going to tell my mother about how distributed ledger technology is going to help her figure out whether her fish has been sustainably sourced, if it really is that wild Alaskan salmon, how does distributed ledger, the blockchain, help?
Right. Well, today, famously, twice as much organic food is sold as is produced, right? We really have no way to tell. I mean, you hope that when you buy it at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, that they've done the due diligence to see where it comes from. And if the supply chains are really short, you know, if they bought it from a farm 10 miles away, that's probably easy enough. But when you're sourcing things from the other side of the planet, having a common database, a common ledger that people are writing transactions to, that give you visibility into where it came from, and that depend upon the integrity of the participants, depends upon, and where signatures are involved and cryptography are involved, give everybody in that network much greater confidence in the integrity of that data. Now, you can still lie and write something to the blockchain, but if you are selling me fish and I see you didn't get that fish from somebody certified, then I probably shouldn't buy the fish from you.
Okay.
And so hopefully in the future, whether you're buying fish or diamonds or rice, when you look at an app to buy that, it'll tell you where did it come from and how much confidence is there that it came from a known good source.
And are you already seeing bad actors being pushed out of the market as a result of this technology?
Yes. So the Diamond supply chain project that has been put together by Everledger, in addition to many of the diamond companies in the world and sourcing and mines and that sort of thing, already has seen millions of diamonds flow through the system from out of the ground to the retail sector, and already stopped millions of dollars worth of attempts at fraud. So that's really cool. There's similar projects in tantalum in Africa, which is a heavy earth, a rare metal used in batteries that has already...
For phones, for...
Exactly, for all sorts of devices. I mean, every device here, right, at Davos, right, uses materials that can come from sources that might have sourced that using slave labor or using unsafe working conditions, that
Places
sort of
like
thing.
Rwanda, Democratic Republic of Congo.
So Rwanda follows the rules. They have really good verification of that the sources are clean, but they sit right next to the DRC, which does not. And so there's a company called Circular that has built a blockchain network for participants in that supply chain that traces where it comes from and helps ensure that the stuff that is certified as coming out of Rwandan mines is what ends up in your iPhone.
So that's interesting. So there's a whole social impact side to the distributed ledger technology as well. Where else are you seeing? I'd love to hear a little bit about what's happening with refugees, digital identity, and also what the challenges are there.
So one of the big challenges with any of the ordinary digital ID systems out there is that they are centralized either on a business, like your Facebook ID, or on a country, like India's Aadhaar system. And they tend to create these walled gardens, so to speak, where it's very hard to interoperate with other systems. And there's an approach that's been developed even before the blockchain world kind of emerged called user-centric or self-sovereign ID. That's more based on you having a wallet that has IDs from many different sources sources and being able to present them and have the integrity of that checked. What blockchain technology brings to that is a way to check the integrity of those documents and actually help it ensure all the parties know when they can trust that, and helps you understand who you shared it with and be able to withdraw that consent at some point in the future. And so this is really interesting for highly migrant populations, Indians who go to Singapore and work, for example, and come back, or refugee camp scenarios where you need to give an identity to someone where they can work and get a health record there, get a credit record that they start building there, but then that comes with them when they move on to the next country that they move to. And so lots of projects looking at the use of blockchain technology there.
So what happens if you lose your smartphone, though? I know it sounds like a ridiculous question, but if everything's kept on the in a sort of digital form, but you've got this sort of machine that you're trying to share it all with, what happens if somebody steals it or you lose it?
Well, it'll look a lot like safety deposit boxes at banks, right? Where you'll have information on your phone, kind of like you do today with your, say, your password manager, or if you are buying and selling cryptocurrencies, you have a wallet where you can store a backup of that in different places. But there are people in the world we want to serve that don't even have a smartphone, right? And for them, you want to be able to give them a QR code, give them an identity card, maybe a small token they can plug into something that acts as their digital persona, right? And if they lose that, you need to be able to recreate that. So lots of interesting approaches out there, including things like name 5 friends, and if 3 of them can identify you positively as that digital identity, then it reconstructs the keys and reconstructs the wallet for you.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So where are the blockages? I know that regulatory is one issue. The technology seems to be there, but where do you see the biggest walls still to this garden?
And I really think 2018 is the year that the technology came to be something that organizations can deploy with confidence. It still requires some knowledge. It still, especially since you want to fan that network out across a large number of parties rather than just let one company run the whole thing. But the technology is not the challenge today. The two really are kind of the regulatory and the legal challenges. You know, things like, will the court systems accept the outcome of an agreement arrived at on a distributed ledger between two parties, right? Will they consider that an authoritative system of record? And many of the accounting firms out there, Accenture, Ernst & Young, and PwC, are starting to create accounting practices that map to the use of distributed ledger to try to help resolve some of that ambiguity, right? But still the question emerges of which countries recognize the existence of digital assets on a blockchain, and that's growing in the United States, but certain countries like Singapore are very far along in that approach. The second one is really governance. All of these blockchain networks are networks of businesses, sometimes involving government agencies, sometimes involving civil society actors or nonprofits. But how is that network pulled together? What is the governance? Who is the referee on the football field, right? Some of these networks are being built in very flat ways with, say, neutral nonprofits at the core, or existing, say, consortia, right? Standing these up and saying, okay, we'll set the rules and now everybody works together. Others are centered on existing companies who are taking existing hub and spoke systems and making them more decentralized. One of the ones doing that very well is Change Healthcare, who runs a very large insurance claims processing network. Already they're doing 50 million transactions a day on
50 million transactions a day.
Yep, routing insurance payment claims in the United States on top of a Hyperledger Fabric network. But others who try to centralize the IP, centralize the brand, centralize the control in a single company are not doing so well. So we tend to think that those networks that'll be flatter, that'll be easier to join, will be the ones that will truly grow to a substantial size and have impact in their market.
It does feel like there's something about a governance system that is flat worldwide, that is above the state, seems to be where we're moving. And I speak about that because one of the things that Stan at Hub Culture is working on is this idea of the sort of digital state. Sounds science fiction, but it doesn't sound too far away from what you're talking about.
I think we will tend not to have a single world government for the same reason we don't have a single language or a single currency. You know, decentralization has merit, right? Even when we're talking about governance. And having competition between governance networks is not a bad thing. For the same reason, having competition between cryptocurrencies or competition between, you know, different in other technology domains, right? And so we will see multiple blockchain networks out there. I don't think we'll see convergence on a single one. They will be domain specific, they'll be business community specific, possibly regional. But we are seeing a lot of technologies emerge to cross transaction connections between these networks, right? To build something that's not 1,000 disconnected networks, but a web of networks. And we're working on quite a bit of that at Hyperledger, and I'm really excited about that.
Brian, thank you so much for being our guinea pig, our blockchain guinea pig, in fact, distributed ledger guinea pig, Brian Behlendorf from Hyperledger at the Linux Foundation. And I'm Edie Lush.